In a locked Chelsea studio, artist Victor Lemaire lies dead, poisoned, with a scandalous painting unfinished. Was it the wealthy patron hiding a ruinous secret, the sharp-tongued critic with a grudge, or the enigmatic model, his muse? Hercule Poirot unravels a web of betrayal, a hidden passage, and a deadly truth concealed in a single rose. In the midnight canvas, every stroke reveals a motive and a murderer. Chapter 1. The locked studio. The rain fell in relentless sheets over Chelsea, turning the cobblestones into a glistening mirror of gaslight. Hercule Poirot, immaculate despite the deluge, stepped from the cab with the precision of a man who disdained disorder in all its forms. His patent leather shoes gleamed, and his moustache, waxed to perfection, quivered slightly as he inhaled the damp air. Beside him, Captain Hastings wrestled with an umbrella, his good-natured face creased with irritation at the weather's assault. "Really, Poirot?" Hastings grumbled, holding the umbrella aloft. "Couldn't this have waited until morning? It's a beastly night." Poirot's green eyes twinkled with amusement. "Mon ami, crime doesn't wait for the sun. Inspector Japp has summoned us, and when Japp calls, it is because the matter is urgent and intriguing." They approached a narrow, ivy-clad building, its windows dark save for one on the top floor, where a faint glow flickered. A constable stood guard at the door, his oilskin coat dripping. He saluted as Japp emerged, his face grim under the brim of his hat. "Glad you're here, Poirot," Japp said, his voice clipped. "It's a queer one. Victor Lemaire, the painter, found dead in his studio. Door bolted from the inside, window latched. No one in or out, yet there he is, stone cold." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A locked room, you say? Most interesting. Lead on, Inspector." They climbed a creaking staircase, the air growing heavy with the scent of oil paint and turpentine. At the top, a splintered door hung ajar, forced open by a neighbor's shoulder after Lemaire failed to answer calls that morning. The studio was a cavern of shadows, lit only by a single lamp casting eerie patterns across the walls. Canvases leaned against every surface, some vibrant, others cloaked in cloth. At the room's heart stood an easel, and slumped before it was Victor Lemaire, his once lively frame now still, his head resting on the half-finished canvas as if in exhausted surrender. Poirot stepped forward, his movements deliberate, like a cat navigating a cluttered shelf. The canvas held his attention first. A woman in shadow, her form half-sketched, a rose clutched in her hand. The brushstrokes were wild, almost feverish, a stark contrast to the meticulous works lining the walls. Poirot's gaze darted to Lemaire's hands, stained with paint, but no brush lay near. An overturned chair lay sprawled nearby, its legs pointing accusingly at the ceiling. A small vial, glinting faintly, rested beneath the easel, its cap loose. "Curious," Poirot murmured, bending to inspect the vial without touching it. "Empty, yet it carries a faint odor. Something sharp, not merely turpentine." Japp nodded. "My men think it's cyanide. We'll have it tested, but that's our guess. No glass or cup, though. How'd he take it? And why's the room locked tight?" Poirot straightened, his eyes sweeping to the studio. The single window was latched, its frame unmarred by signs of tampering. A heavy bookcase stood against one wall, stuffed with art books and sketches. A table held jars of brushes, pigments, and rags, all in disarray. The floor, speckled with paint, bore no obvious footprints. Yet something in the scene stirred Poirot's little grey cells. "Hastings," he said, turning to his friend, "observe the chair. It is overturned, yes, but not broken. A struggle, perhaps, but not a violent one. And the canvas. Why such haste in its execution? Lemaire was a man of precision, yet this work is chaotic. Hastings frowned, peering at the painting. Looks like he was in a rush to finish it. Maybe he knew something was wrong. Précisément, Poirot said, tapping his temple. But what did he know? And who wished to ensure he did not complete his thought? He turned to Japp. The neighbor who found him. What did he say? Old chap named Grayson lives downstairs, Japp replied. Heard nothing unusual last night, but Lemaire was up late, working by lamplight. Grayson knocked this morning when Lemaire didn't appear for his usual coffee. Got worried, broke in, and found this. Poirot nodded, his mind already weaving patterns. And the suspects, Inspector. For there are always suspects, Japp sighed. 3 so far. Sir Reginald Holt, a bigwig patron who bankrolled Lemaire. Clara Beaumont, an art critic who tore into Lemaire's last exhibition. And Elise Moreau, his model. Stunning girl, posed for most of his paintings. All were seen near here last night. I've got them waiting downstairs. Bon, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. A patron, a critic, a muse, each with a motive, perhaps. We shall see what truths they hide. He glanced once more at the canvas, its shadowed figure seeming to watch him. This painting, it speaks, Inspector. It tells a story Lemaire could not finish. But Hercule Poirot, he will finish it. As they descended the stairs, the rain battered the windows, and Poirot's mind churned. A locked room, a poisoned artist, a canvas left incomplete. The stage was set, and the curtain had risen on a mystery that demanded his utmost attention. Chapter 2. The 3 suspects. The rain had softened to a drizzle as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings followed Inspector Japp down the creaking staircase of Victor Lemaire's Chelsea studio. The air in the narrow hallway below was thick with the damp mustiness of old buildings, and a single gas lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. At the foot of the stairs, a small parlour had been commandeered by Japp's men, its mismatched chairs now occupied by 3 figures whose tension was palpable, though each wore it differently. Poirot paused at the threshold, his sharp green eyes taking in the scene as if it were a tableau vivant, each suspect a brushstroke in the mystery of Lemaire's death. Inspector Japp, wiping rain from his brow, gestured toward the trio. Here they are, Poirot, the last people to see Lemaire alive, or so they claim. I've had them wait here while we inspected the studio. Thought you'd want a word. Mais oui, Inspector, Poirot replied, his voice smooth as polished oak. The words of the living often reveal what the dead cannot. Let us meet these players in our little drama. He adjusted his gloves, a habit that betrayed his need for order, and stepped into the parlour with the air of a conductor approaching his orchestra. Hastings, trailing behind, whispered, Rather a mixed bunch, aren't they? I say, Poirot, this feels like one of your puzzles already. Poirot's moustache twitched with the hint of a smile. Patience, mon ami. The puzzle is only beginning to take shape. Observe and listen. The first suspect, Sir Reginald Holt, stood by the window, his broad shoulders squared against the grey light filtering through the rain-streaked panes. A man in his late 50s, he exuded the effortless authority of wealth and breeding, his tailored suit immaculate despite the late hour of his summons. His greying hair was swept back, and his eyes, a piercing blue, held a guarded intensity. He turned as Poirot entered, offering a nod that was polite, but not warm. Clara Beaumont sat in a high-backed chair, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her auburn hair was pinned severely, and her angular face, though handsome, was marred by a scowl that seemed habitual. She wore a dark green dress, its simplicity at odds with the sharpness of her gaze, which darted from Japp to Poirot with barely concealed irritation. A silver ring on her left hand caught the lamplight, its surface worn but gleaming. Elise Moreau occupied a sagging armchair near the fireplace, where a feeble flame sputtered. Her beauty was undeniable, even in distress. Golden hair cascading in loose waves, eyes a deep violet that shimmered with unshed tears. Her dress, a soft blue muslin, clung to her slender frame, and her hands twisted a lace handkerchief as if it were the only anchor keeping her from collapse. Yet there was a stillness to her, a quiet strength beneath the fragility that piqued Poirot's interest. Japp cleared his throat. Right then, Sir Reginald Holt, Miss Clara Beaumont, Miss Elise Moreau. This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot, a detective of some repute. He's here to help us get to the bottom of Lemaire's death. I'll need each of you to tell us where you were last night and what business you had with the deceased. Poirot raised a hand, his gesture delicate but commanding. If I may, Inspector, I prefer to conduct this entretien in my own way. Each of you, he said, addressing the suspects, will speak in turn. I wish to hear not only what you did, but what you felt, what you saw, what you heard. The truth. It hides in the smallest details. His eyes swept over them, lingering on each face as if reading an unwritten script. Sir Reginald stepped forward first, his voice resonant with the confidence of a man accustomed to being heard. I suppose I'll begin then. I'm no stranger to Lemaire's work. Funded his last 3 exhibitions, in fact. Last night I visited his studio around 9 o'clock to discuss a new commission. A portrait for my wife's birthday. Something grand for the drawing room. Lemaire was in high spirits, full of ideas, though he seemed distracted, perhaps. Kept glancing at that half-finished canvas of his. I left by 10, as I had a late supper at my club. That's all I know. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Distracted, you say, Sir Reginald? In what manner? A man distracted is a man with a secret, non? Holt's jaw tightened, but he answered smoothly. He was fidgety, kept pacing. Said he was working on something personal, wouldn't show it to me. I didn't press him. Artists and their whims, you know. I assumed it was that canvas upstairs, the one with the woman and the rose. And you saw nothing unusual? No visitors? No signs of distress? Poirot's voice was gentle, but his eyes were sharp as a blade. Nothing out of the ordinary, Holt replied. The studio was cluttered, as always, smelled of paint and turpentine. Lemaire was alive when I left, and the door was unlocked. I saw myself out. Poirot nodded, then turned to Clara Beaumont, who had been watching the exchange with a curl of disdain on her lips. Mademoiselle Beaumont, your turn. You are an art critic, I understand. Your words carry weight in this world of paint and canvas. What brought you to Lemaire's studio last night? Clara's eyes narrowed, and her voice, when she spoke, was crisp, each syllable clipped as if she resented the need to explain herself. I went to see Victor Lemaire because he demanded it, sent me a letter, practically ordering me to come. He was furious about my review of his last exhibition, called it vicious and uninformed. I arrived around 10:30, and we argued. He accused me of ruining his reputation, said I didn't understand his genius. I told him his work had grown stale, that he was coasting on past glories. It wasn't pleasant, but I left him alive, if that's what you're getting at. Poirot's moustache twitched. An argument, mademoiselle? Heated, perhaps. And what time did you depart? By 11, she said, her tone defiant. I had no reason to stay. He was ranting, half drunk on his own ego. Walked home. My neighbour, Mrs. Grayson, saw me return. She'll confirm it. And the studio, Poirot pressed. What was its state? The canvas, the room, any detail, however small, may be significant. Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening around her silver ring. The canvas was on the easel, half covered with a cloth. He pulled it back to show me, said it would change everything. It was odd, not his usual style. The woman in it looked like no one I recognized. The room was a mess, brushes scattered, a chair knocked over. I thought he'd been drinking, but I didn't see a bottle. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A chair knocked over, you say? Most interesting. And this canvas? It spoke to you, perhaps? It told a story. Clara snorted. It was a painting, not a novel. I told him it looked rushed, amateurish. He didn't take kindly to that. Poirot turned to Elise Moreau, who had been silent, her violet eyes fixed on the floor. Mademoiselle Moreau, you were Lemaire's muse, were you not? His paintings, they are filled with your likeness. Tell me of your evening with him. Elise's voice was soft, trembling, yet clear, like a bell muffled by fog. I was with Victor until midnight. He asked me to pose for him, as I often did. He was working on that canvas, the woman with the rose. He said it was important, that it would be his greatest work. But he was strange, nervous. He kept looking at the door, as if expecting someone. I finished posing, and he told me to go home. He was alive when I left, I swear it. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she brushed it away with her handkerchief. Poirot leaned forward, his tone gentle but probing. Nervous, you say? And this canvas, did he speak of its subject? The woman, who was she? Elise shook her head, her golden hair catching the firelight. He wouldn't say. He called her a shadow of truth. I thought it might be me. But the face wasn't mine. Not quite. I left through the front door. It wasn't locked then. Poirot stepped back, clasping his hands behind him. Merci, mademoiselle. Your words, they paint a picture of their own. He turned to Japp, who had been scribbling notes. Inspector, you have heard their stories. Each claims to have left Lemaire alive, yet he is dead in a room locked from within. A puzzle, non? Japp grunted. A puzzle, all right. The door was bolted, Poirot. No one could have got in or out after Elise left at midnight, unless you think Lemaire poisoned himself, which I doubt. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Suicide? None, Inspector. A man doesn't lock himself in to die, leaving a canvas half-finished. No, this is murder, and the method, it is clever. We must consider the vial, the canvas, the chair, and the door. Ah, the door is not so simple as it seems. Hastings, who had been listening intently, ventured a question. Poirot, do you think one of them is lying? They all seem, well, plausible, but something's off. Précisément, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. They speak the truth, but not all of it. Each holds a piece of the puzzle, and each conceals another. Sir Reginald, with his wealth and secrets, Mademoiselle Beaumont, with her venom and her ring, Mademoiselle Moreau, with her tears and her mystery. We must dig deeper, mon ami. Japp crossed his arms. I've got men checking their alibis. Holt's club, Clara's neighbor, Elisa's landlady. But that locked door. How'd the killer get out? Poirot smiled enigmatically. The door, Inspector, is but a distraction. The truth lies elsewhere, in the canvas, in the vial, in the shadows of this night. We shall return to the studio. There is more to learn. As they left the parlour, Poirot lingered a moment, his gaze resting on the suspects. Sir Reginald stood tall, but his fingers drummed against his thigh, a nervous tick. Clara's scowl had softened, replaced by a flicker of unease as she twisted her ring. Elisa's eyes followed Poirot, wide and searching, as if pleading for understanding. He inclined his head, a silent promise that no secret would elude him. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet stone. Poirot paused, breathing deeply. The night, Hastings, it holds its secrets close. But Hercule Poirot, he will uncover them all. They returned to the studio, where the lamplight still cast its ghostly glow over Lemaire's final work. Poirot stood before the canvas, his eyes tracing the hurried strokes, the shadowed woman, the rose. This, he murmured, is the key. Lemaire painted not just a picture, but a truth, and someone killed to keep it hidden. He bent to examine the vial again, its faint residue gleaming like a warning. Cyanide, perhaps, he said. But how was it given? No cup, no glass, only this. He gestured to the turpentine-soaked rags, the scattered brushes. The method, it is here, in this room. We need only find it. Hastings shivered, glancing at the dark corners of the studio. It's eerie, Poirot, like the paintings watching us. Poirot chuckled softly. Perhaps it is, mon ami, and it has much to say. As they prepared to leave, Poirot's gaze fell on the bookcase, its heavy frame slightly askew. He stepped closer, running a gloved finger along its edge. Curious, he said, almost to himself. Very curious indeed. The night stretched on, and with it, the mystery deepened. Poirot's little grey cells were at work, piecing together the fragments of a truth that lay hidden in the locked studio, the half-finished canvas, and the tangled motives of 3 souls bound to Victor Lemaire's final hours. Chapter 3. The half-finished canvas. The studio of Victor Lemaire, bathed in the pallid glow of the single lamp, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot stood before the easel, his eyes fixed on the half-finished canvas. The rain had ceased, leaving a damp chill that clung to the walls, but Poirot appeared oblivious to the cold, his mind wholly absorbed by the work before him. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, stood at his elbow, his brow furrowed as he tried to decipher what held his friend's attention so fiercely. Inspector Japp, meanwhile, paced near the door, his impatience palpable, though he knew better than to interrupt Poirot's silent scrutiny. The canvas was a study in contrasts. Vivid slashes of crimson and gold clashed with deep, brooding shadows, forming the figure of a woman, her face obscured by a veil of darkness. In her hand a single rose gleamed, its petals almost luminous against the muted background. The brushstrokes were erratic, lacking the disciplined elegance of Lemaire's earlier works, which lined the studio walls in orderly rows. This painting was raw, urgent, as if the artist had been racing against time itself. Poirot leaned closer, his gloved finger hovering just above the canvas, careful not to touch. "Mon ami," he said softly to Hastings, "do you see? This is not merely a painting. It is a confession, a cry, perhaps even an accusation. Lemaire, he painted this with purpose." Hastings squinted, his practical mind grappling with Poirot's abstraction. A confession. It's just a woman with a rose, Poirot. Looks like he didn't have time to finish it. No, no, Poirot replied, his voice sharp with reproof. You look, but you do not see. The haste, the disorder. It tells us Lemaire was driven by something more than art. Why this woman? Why the rose? And why, Hastings, did he leave it incomplete? Japp, pausing in his pacing, interjected. I'll tell you what's incomplete. The evidence. We've got a dead painter, a locked room, and that vial you keep staring at, Poirot. My men say it's cyanide, sure enough, but there's no trace of how he took it. No cup, no bottle, nothing in his stomach but a bit of bread and cheese from supper. It's a blasted mystery. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or irritation. Hastings could never quite tell. A mystery, oui, but not unsolvable. The vial, Inspector. It is a clue, but not the only one. Observe the room. He gestured broadly, his small frame commanding the space. The overturned chair, the scattered brushes, the canvas itself. These are the words of a story Lemaire cannot tell us himself. He stepped toward the overturned chair. Its wooden frame sprawled across the paint-splattered floor. Kneeling with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature, Poirot examined the legs, noting a faint scratch on one, barely visible in the dim light. This chair, he murmured. It was not knocked over in a struggle. The scratch is fresh, but shallow. It fell, perhaps, as Lemaire staggered, but not from violence. Non, this was something else. Hastings, eager to contribute, pointed to the table, cluttered with art supplies. What about these, Poirot? Brushes everywhere, jars tipped over. Looks like he was in a right state. Poirot nodded, moving to the table. He lifted a rag, stiff with dried paint, and sniffed it cautiously. The sharp tang of turpentine filled his nostrils, but there was another scent, faint and acrid, that made his eyes narrow. He set the rag down and picked up a small bottle of turpentine, its cap loose, a faint discoloration clouding the liquid within. Interesting, he said, holding it to the light. Inspector, this bottle, have your men examine it closely. Not for fingerprints, but for its contents. There is something not quite right. Japp frowned, taking the bottle gingerly. You think the poison was in the turpentine? But how? He didn't drink it, surely. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Patience, Inspector. The method, it will reveal itself. For now, let us return to the canvas. He stood before the easel again, his gaze tracing the woman's form. The rose, he noted, was rendered with exquisite care, its petals detailed to the point of obsession, while the rest of the painting seemed almost frantic. This rose, he said, it is a symbol, perhaps. In art, a rose speaks of love, of secrets, of sacrifice. But whose secret? Whose sacrifice? Hastings ventured a guess. Elise Moreau, maybe. She said she posed for him last night. Could this be her? Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings. Mademoiselle Moreau said the face was not hers, not quite. And yet there is a familiarity. We must learn who this woman is, for she is the heart of Lemaire's final act. Japp, growing restless, gestured toward the vial under the easel. What about this, then? Cyanide, my men say. But how did it get into him? And why is it just lying there, empty? Poirot knelt again, studying the vial's position. It lay half hidden beneath the easel, as if dropped in haste. The floor around it was clean, save for a single smudge of vermilion paint, matching the rose on the canvas. This vial, he said. It was not meant to be found, I think. Yet it was not hidden well. Perhaps our murderer was interrupted, or careless. Or perhaps he trailed off, his mind racing. Rising, he surveyed the room once more, his eyes lingering on the heavy bookcase against the far wall. Its edges were slightly misaligned, as if it had been moved and not quite returned to its place. He stepped closer, running a gloved finger along the seam where the bookcase met the wall. A faint draught brushed his skin, and his eyes gleamed with sudden interest. "Hastings," he called, "assist me, if you please." Together, they pushed the bookcase, its weight resisting, but yielding under their effort. A low groan echoed as it slid aside, revealing a narrow gap in the wall, a hidden panel, barely wide enough for a man to pass through. Beyond it, a dark passage stretched into shadow, its air cool and musty. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot exclaimed, his voice tinged with triumph. "A secret passage, the locked room. It is no longer a mystery. Our murderer, he entered and left unseen." Japp, peering into the darkness, was skeptical. "A passage? In a Chelsea studio? This isn't some Gothic manor, Poirot. Where does it lead?" Poirot stepped cautiously into the passage, his small torch casting a thin beam. The walls were rough, the floor uneven, but a faint trail of dust suggested recent use. "It leads, I suspect, to the alley behind the building, a discreet exit for one who wished to come and go unnoticed. Inspector, have your men examine this passage. Look for footprints, for traces of paint. Vermilion, perhaps." Japp nodded, barking orders to a constable who had appeared at the door. "Right, we'll seal it off and check it thoroughly. But this doesn't tell us who, Poirot." "Non," Poirot agreed, stepping back into the studio. "But it tells us how. The murderer knew this passage, knew Lemaire's habits. The poison, the canvas, the passage, they are threads in a tapestry, and we must weave them together." Hastings, still staring at the passage, shook his head. "It's clever, I'll give you that. But why poison him? Why not just, I don't know, knock him over the head?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Because, mon ami, poison is silent, subtle. It leaves no mark, no struggle, only questions. And this poison, it was administered in a way we have not yet discovered. The turpentine, perhaps, or something else in this room. We must be methodical." He returned to the canvas, his mind circling back to its unfinished state. Lemaire was painting this woman, this Rose, when death came. Why? Was he exposing a secret, threatening someone? Or was this canvas a message meant for us to find? Japp scratched his chin. "You're saying the painting's a clue? That's a bit fanciful, even for you." Poirot's smile was serene. "Fanciful, perhaps, but true. Art, Inspector, is never just art. It is the soul laid bare. Lemaire's soul. It speaks through this canvas, and we must listen." As they prepared to leave the studio, Poirot took one final look at the room, his mind cataloguing every detail. The overturned chair, the discolored turpentine, the vermilion smudge, the hidden passage. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and he felt the familiar thrill of the chase. "The little grey cells," he murmured. "They are awake, and they will not rest until the truth is revealed." Outside, the night was still, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Poirot adjusted his hat, his thoughts already turning to the suspects, Sir Reginald with his guarded demeanour, Clara with her sharp tongue, Elise with her tearful eyes. One of them, he knew, held the key to Lemaire's death, and he, Hercule Poirot, would find it. Chapter 4. The Patron's Secret. The morning sun pierced the London fog, casting a pale glow over the elegant streets of Mayfair as Hercule Poirot and Hardot, Captain Hastings, stepped from their cab outside Sir Reginald Holt's imposing residence. The house, a Georgian masterpiece of red brick and white cornices, stood as a testament to its owner's wealth and taste, its windows gleaming like watchful eyes. Poirot, impeccable in his tailored overcoat, adjusted his hat and surveyed the facade with a discerning eye, as if the building itself might whisper secrets about its master. Hastings, rubbing his hands against the chill, glanced at his friend. "Rather grand, isn't it, Poirot? Sir Reginald must be rolling in it to afford a place like this. Do you really think he's mixed up in Le Maire's death?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement at Hastings' forthrightness. "Mon ami, wealth does not exempt one from motive. Indeed, it often provides it. Sir Reginald, he is a man of influence, yes, but influence comes with secrets. We shall see what lies behind his polished exterior." The heavy oak door swung open, revealing a butler whose starched demeanour matched the house's formality. "Sir Reginald is expecting you, gentlemen," he intoned, leading them through a marble-floored hall adorned with gilt-framed portraits and gleaming chandeliers. The air carried the faint scent of beeswax and old money, a world far removed from the turpentine-soaked chaos of Le Maire's studio. They were ushered into a study, its walls lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. Sir Reginald Holt stood by a roaring fire, his broad frame silhouetted against the flames. He turned, offering a smile that was courteous but guarded, his blue eyes assessing Poirot with a flicker of wariness. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, gesturing to a pair of leather armchairs. "Please sit. I've ordered tea. I trust this visit concerns poor Le Maire's tragedy?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, settling into the chair with the grace of a man who never misjudged his place in any room. "The death of Victor Le Maire. It is a puzzle that demands answers. You, Sir Reginald, were one of the last to see him alive. I wish to understand your connection to the artist." Holt's smile tightened, but he nodded, seating himself behind the desk. "As I told Inspector Japp, I visited Le Maire to discuss a commission, a portrait for my wife, something to mark her 50th birthday. I've supported his work for years. His talent was undeniable, if erratic. I left him in good spirits, or so I thought." Poirot's eyes, sharp as cut glass, fixed on Holt. "And yet you mentioned he was distracted. A man planning a grand portrait does not pace and fidget, no? What troubled him, Sir Reginald? Did he speak of this canvas, the woman with the rose?" Holt's fingers, resting on the desk, twitched slightly, a movement Poirot noted with interest. "He mentioned it in passing," Holt said, his voice steady but deliberate. "Said it was a personal project, something he was pouring his soul into. I didn't press him. Artists can be peculiar about their work." The butler entered, setting down a silver tray with a teapot, delicate cups, and a plate of scones. Poirot accepted a cup, his movements precise, but his attention never wavered from Holt. "Peculiar, oui. And yet, this canvas, it was not like his others, hasty, almost desperate. You saw it, perhaps, before it was covered?" Holt poured his own tea, the faint clink of the spoon betraying a tremor in his hand. "I glimpsed it, yes. A woman, half sketched. I assumed it was one of his fancies. Le Maire was always chasing muses." His tone was dismissive, but Poirot detected a note of unease. Rising, Poirot paced the room, his small frame moving with the quiet purpose of a predator circling its prey. His eyes fell on a painting above the fireplace, a Lemaire original, its vibrant colors depicting a masked ball. Figures in silken gowns and domino masks twirled in a scene of decadent revelry, their poses suggestive of secrets shared in shadowed corners. One figure, a woman in crimson, stood apart, her masked face turned toward the viewer, a knowing smile curling her lips. "Magnifique," Poirot murmured, pausing before the painting. "A private commission, Sir Reginald. This is not one of Lemaire's public works." Holt's expression stiffened, his teacup pausing halfway to his lips. "Yes, a private piece. I acquired it some years ago. Lemaire had a knack for capturing certain moods." Poirot turned, his smile disarming, but his eyes relentless. "Moods or truths? This painting, it speaks of scandal, of forbidden liaisons. Was there another such work, Sir Reginald? One that Lemaire refused to part with, perhaps? Or one he threatened to reveal?" The room grew still, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Holt set down his cup, his movements deliberate. "You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low. "Lemaire painted what I paid him to paint. If he had other works, they were his business, not mine." Hastings, who had been quietly sipping his tea, ventured a question. "But if he was painting something scandalous, something that could ruin someone, wouldn't that give someone a reason to stop him?" Holt's eyes flicked to Hastings, a flash of irritation crossing his face before he masked it with a smile. "A fanciful notion, Captain. Lemaire was an artist, not a blackmailer. If he had enemies, they weren't of my making." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his head tilted as if listening to an unseen melody. "And yet, Sir Reginald, you are uneasy. The little grey cells, they observe the tremor in your hand, the tension in your voice. You supported Lemaire, oui, but was there a price? A painting, perhaps, that you wish to keep hidden?" Holt rose, his height imposing, but Poirot stood his ground, undaunted. "I've answered your questions," Holt said, his tone clipped. "I was at my club after 10, as my colleagues will confirm. I had no reason to harm Lemaire. If you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to." Poirot inclined his head, the picture of courtesy. "Of course, Sir Reginald. We shall not detain you further, for now. But the truth, it has a way of emerging, like a painting from the shadows." As they were shown out, Poirot paused in the hall, his eyes lingering on a small side table where a vase of roses stood, their crimson petals vivid against the polished wood. "Roses," he murmured, "like the one in Lemaire's canvas. A coincidence, Hastings, or a signature?" Outside, the Mayfair streets were bustling, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, weaving the threads of Holt's words with the images of the studio. "He knows more than he says," Poirot said as they walked toward their cab. "The painting in his study. It is a clue, Hastings, a scandal, perhaps, that Lemaire held over him. We must learn more of this masked ball, of the woman in crimson." Hastings nodded, though his expression was skeptical. He seemed rattled, I'll grant you that. "But murder, Poirot? He's a gentleman, not a thug." Poirot's smile was wry. "Gentlemen, mon ami, are capable of great crimes when their honor, or their secrets, are at stake. Sir Reginald Holt, he is a man with much to lose, and we shall discover what it is." As the cab rattled back toward Chelsea, Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The canvas, the passage, the poison, the patron, each was a stroke in a larger picture, and he, Hercule Poirot, would paint it complete. Chapter 5. The critic's venom. The late morning air in London carried a crisp edge, the fog lifting to reveal a city bustling with purpose. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings sat at a corner table in a bustling café on the Strand. Its windows steamed from the warmth within. The clatter of teacups and the murmur of conversation provided a lively backdrop as Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes fixed on the door. Clara Beaumont was due to arrive, and Poirot, ever punctual, had chosen this public setting to unsettle the sharp-tongued critic, hoping the crowd might loosen her guarded tongue. Hastings, stirring sugar into his tea, glanced at his friend. "I say, Poirot, why meet her here? She's a prickly sort, might clam up in a place like this." Poirot's moustache curved slightly, a sign of his quiet amusement. "Précisément, mon ami. A woman like Mademoiselle Beaumont thrives on control. In her own domain, she is a fortress. Here, among the noise and the eyes of strangers, she may reveal what she guards so fiercely. The little grey cells, they anticipate her discomfort." The door swung open, and Clara Beaumont entered, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her dark green coat severe against the café's cheerful chaos. Her angular face was set in a scowl, but her eyes, sharp and assessing, scanned the room until they landed on Poirot. She approached with the brisk stride of a woman who wasted no time, pulling out a chair and sitting without ceremony. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice clipped. "I assume this is about Le Maire. I've told Inspector Japp all I know. What more do you want?" Poirot inclined his head, his manner impeccably courteous. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, I seek only the truth, and you, with your keen eye for detail, are uniquely suited to provide it. Your review of Le Maire's work, it was, shall we say, less than kind. Tell me, what drove such passion in your words?" Clara's lips tightened, and her fingers, resting on the table, twisted the silver ring on her left hand, a habit Poirot noted with interest. "Le Maire's work had declined," she said, her tone as sharp as her pen. "His last exhibition was a shadow of his earlier brilliance, overwrought, self-indulgent, relying on his reputation rather than skill. I wrote what I saw. If he couldn't handle criticism, that was his failing, not mine." Poirot's eyes gleamed, undeterred by her defensiveness. "And yet, mademoiselle, he summoned you to his studio. A letter, you said, demanding your presence. Most unusual, no? An artist does not invite his critic for a mere exchange of pleasantries. What did he wish to prove?" Clara's gaze flickered, a momentary crack in her composure. "He was furious, as I told Japp, called my review vicious and ignorant, said I was trying to ruin him. He wanted to show me his new work, that canvas with the woman and the rose, claimed it would silence his detractors, prove his genius. I told him it was sloppy, rushed, a mess. He didn't take it well." Hastings, unable to resist, leaned forward. "A mess, you say? But he thought it was his masterpiece. Bit odd, don't you think, to argue over a half-finished painting?" Clara's eyes flashed with irritation. "Odd? No, Captain. Typical. Le Maire was all ego. He thought every stroke was divine. That canvas was no masterpiece, just a frantic scribble. I told him so, and he shouted me out of the studio." Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression serene, but his mind alert. "And this argument, it grew heated, oui? You mentioned a chair overturned, brushes scattered. Did Le Maire, perhaps, threaten you? Or did you, mademoiselle, have reason to fear him?" Clara's hand stilled on her ring, and her voice dropped, cold and precise. "Threaten me? He tried, But I'm not easily intimidated. He said he'd expose my past. Some nonsense about a youthful mistake. I told him to try it. I've nothing to hide." Her words were bold, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in her fingers, the way her eyes darted to the side. "A youthful mistake," Poirot repeated, his tone gentle but probing. "Most intriguing. What was this indiscretion, mademoiselle? A secret worth silencing, perhaps?" Clara's scowl deepened, but she met his gaze. "It was nothing. A flirtation years ago, when I was a student. Lemaire got wind of it, thought he could use it against me. He overestimated its importance. I left him ranting and went home. My neighbor saw me return by 11. That's all." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "And this ring," he said, gesturing to the silver band she twisted. "It is a keepsake, perhaps? From this flirtation?" Clara's hand jerked back, as if burned. "It's just a ring," she snapped. "A trinket, nothing more. You're grasping at straws, Monsieur Poirot." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his smile disarming. "But the straws, they form a pattern. The canvas, the argument, the ring. They are threads, mademoiselle, and I weave them carefully. Tell me, did you notice anything unusual in the studio? A smell? A sound? A detail?" Clara hesitated, her eyes narrowing as if weighing her words. "The studio was a mess, as I said. That turpentine bottle on the table. It was open, spilling a bit. Smelled foul, worse than usual. I thought he'd been careless, mixing his paints. The canvas was half covered when I arrived, but he pulled the cloth off to show me. That's all I remember." Poirot's eyes sharpened at the mention of the turpentine. "Foul, you say? A curious observation. And the canvas. Did Lemaire speak of the woman depicted? Her identity? Her significance?" "He called her his truth," Clara said, her voice tinged with scorn. "Some poetic nonsense. He wouldn't say who she was, only that the painting would change everything. I told him it would change nothing. His work was slipping, and he couldn't face it." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your candor. It is most illuminating. We shall speak again, I think." Clara rose, her movements brisk. "I've nothing more to say. Lemaire's death is a tragedy, but I had no part in it. Good day." She swept out, leaving a faint trace of her lavender scent in the air. Hastings watched her go, then turned to Poirot. "She's a tough one, eh? All bristles and bite. But that bit about the turpentine. Think it's important?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Everything is important, Hastings. The turpentine, the ring, the canvas. They are pieces of the puzzle. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she speaks with conviction, but her hands betray her. That ring, it is no mere trinket, and her knowledge of the turpentine, it suggests more than a passing glance." He rose, adjusting his gloves. "Come, mon ami. We must return to the studio. The turpentine, it calls to us, and I suspect it holds a secret Lemaire took to his grave." As they left the café, Poirot's mind was a whirl of connections, the critic's venom, the artist's rage, the canvas's mystery. Clara Beaumont had painted herself as indifferent, but her words, her gestures, told a different story. The little grey cells were at work, and they would not rest until the truth was laid bare. Chapter 6. The Saw. Model's Tale. The afternoon sun cast a feeble glow through the grimy windows of Elise Moreau's modest flat in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury. The building, a narrow tenement squeezed between a bookshop and a grocer's, lacked the grandeur of Sir Reginald Holt's Mayfair residence or the lively bustle of Clara Beaumont's café meeting place. Yet, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings ascended the creaking stairs, the simplicity of the setting seemed to sharpen Poirot's focus, as if the unadorned surroundings might strip away pretense and reveal the truth beneath. Hastings, ever sensitive to atmosphere, shivered slightly as they reached the landing. Bit dreary, isn't it, Poirot? Hard to imagine a girl like Elise, Lemaire's muse, no less, living in a place like this. Poirot's green eyes flickered with a knowing glint. Mon ami, beauty does not require opulence, nor does truth. Mademoiselle Moreau, she is a canvas herself, painted by Lemaire's brush. But what lies beneath the surface? That is what we must discover. The door opened before they could knock, revealing Elise Moreau, her delicate frame wrapped in a simple shawl, her golden hair loose and catching the light like a halo. Her violet eyes, still shadowed with grief, widened at the sight of Poirot. But she stepped aside, gesturing them into a small sitting room. The space was sparsely furnished, a threadbare sofa, a single chair, a table cluttered with sketching pencils, and a few dog-eared books. On the wall hung a small framed sketch, unmistakably Lemaire's work, a study of a woman's face, her features soft yet elusive, not quite Elise's. "Merci, mademoiselle, for receiving us," Poirot said, his voice gentle as he removed his hat and took the offered chair. "The death of Victor Lemaire, it is a tragedy that touches you deeply, non? You were his muse, his inspiration. I wish to understand your time with him, especially on that final night." Elise sank onto the sofa, her hands twisting the shawl's fringe. "I've told Inspector Japp everything," she said, her voice soft but steady, like a breeze stirring leaves. "I was with Victor until midnight. He was painting that canvas, the woman with the rose. I posed for him, as I often did. He was not himself, nervous, glancing at the door, but he was alive when I left." Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped, his gaze unwavering. "Nervous, you say? Man does not paint his masterpiece with such unease unless something weighs upon him. Tell me, mademoiselle, what was this canvas to him? He spoke of it as his greatest work, yet you said the woman was not you. Not quite. Who was she?" Elise's eyes dropped to her hands, her fingers tightening on the shawl. He wouldn't say. He called her a shadow of truth, said the painting would reveal something important. I thought it might be me, at first. He painted me so often. But when I saw the face, it was different, older perhaps, or altered. I asked him, but he only smiled and said it wasn't for me to know. Hastings, standing by the window, turned with a frown. "Bit odd, don't you think? Painting someone who looks like you but isn't. Sounds like he was hiding something." "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving Elise. "And this secrecy, mademoiselle, did it trouble you? Did Lemaire confide in you as his muse, or did he keep his thoughts locked away?" Elise hesitated, her gaze flickering to the sketch on the wall. "Victor was intense. He saw things in me I didn't see myself. He said I was his muse, his light, but lately he was different. Distant. He spoke of betrayals, of people who wanted to control him. I thought he meant Sir Reginald, or perhaps Clara Beaumont. But he wouldn't explain." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Betrayals, you say? A strong word. And yet you stayed with him, posing until midnight. Tell me of that night. Every detail. The studio, the sounds, the smells. What do you recall?" Elise closed her eyes, as if summoning the scene. The studio was cold, the lamp flickering. Victor was painting furiously, his hands shaking. The canvas was on the easel, half covered at first, but he pulled the cloth away to show me. The rose. He spent so long on it, every petal perfect. The turpentine smelled strong, sharper than usual. There was a bottle on the table, open, and a rag beside it. I heard the rain outside, and once a creak like someone moving downstairs. Victor heard it too. He froze, then laughed it off, said it was the old building. Poirot's eyes sharpened. A creak, mademoiselle. And Lemaire, he was alarmed. This is most significant. Did you see anyone else? Hear any voices? No, she said, shaking her head. Just Victor and me. I left at midnight, as I told Jap. The door was unlocked when I went out. I walked home. My landlady can confirm I was back. By past, Poirot rose, pacing the small room with measured steps, his eyes drawn to the sketch on the wall. He paused before it, noting the delicate lines, the way the woman's eyes seemed to follow him. This sketch, he said, it is Lemaire's, oui? A study for the canvas, perhaps? Elise nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. He gave it to me last week, said it was a gift, a piece of his heart. But it's not me. Not exactly. I don't know who she is. Poirot turned, his expression unreadable. And yet, mademoiselle, you are connected to this woman, this shadow. Lemaire chose you as his muse, yet painted another. Why? Was he protecting you, or hiding something from you? Elise's eyes filled with tears, but she held his gaze. I don't know. I loved Victor, not as a lover, but as an artist, a soul. He was kind to me, gave me a purpose. I wouldn't hurt him, Monsieur Poirot. I couldn't. Poirot's smile was gentle, almost paternal. I do. Not accuse you, mademoiselle, but the heart, it can blind us to truths we do not wish to see. You have given me much to consider. The creek, the turpentine, the sketch, they are pieces of the puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, will place them. As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused at the door, his eyes lingering on Elise's pale face. One last thing, mademoiselle. Did Lemaire ever speak of a secret passage in his studio? A hidden way in or out? Elise's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. No, never. A passage? In that old building? Poirot nodded, his expression enigmatic. Merci, mademoiselle. We shall speak again. Outside, the Bloomsbury streets were quiet, the sun now hidden behind gathering clouds. Hastings, pulling his coat tighter, turned to Poirot. She's hiding something, isn't she? All that talk of love and muses, but she knows more about that painting than she's letting on. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Perhaps, mon ami. Mademoiselle Moreau is a delicate flower, but even flowers have roots that dig deep. The sketch, the creek, the turpentine. They tell a story. And I suspect our muse knows more of Lemaire's secrets than she admits. We must return to the studio, Hastings. The canvas awaits, and it will not lie. Chapter 7. The Secret Passage. The evening shadows lengthened over Chelsea as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings returned to Victor Lemaire's studio, the air heavy with the promise of more rain. The narrow street was quiet now, save for the occasional clatter of a passing cab, and the building loomed like a silent sentinel, its secrets locked within its weathered walls. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, paused at the entrance, his green eyes scanning the facade as if it might betray some hidden truth. Hastings, ever practical, stamped his feet to ward off the cold. Back to the studio, Poirot. I thought we'd seen all there was to see. That passage you found last time. Surely that's the key, isn't it? Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. The passage, mon ami, is but one piece of the puzzle. It tells us how, perhaps, but not who or why. The studio, it holds more secrets, and we must coax them out. The little grey cells, they demand a thorough investigation. Inside, the studio was as they had left it, the single lamp casting its ghostly light over the cluttered space. The half-finished canvas stood on its easel, the woman with the rose seeming to watch them with her shadowed gaze. The overturned chair, the scattered brushes, the faint smudge of vermilion paint, all remained untouched, preserved by Inspector Japp's orders. A constable stood guard at the door, his bored expression brightening at Poirot's arrival. "Inspector Japp's still checking alibis," the constable reported. "He said to let you have a look, sir, but not to touch anything." Poirot nodded, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. "Bon, we shall disturb nothing, but we shall see everything. Hastings, come, let us begin with the bookcase." They moved to the heavy bookcase, its shelves sagging under the weight of art books and sketches. Poirot had noted its slight misalignment on their last visit, and now he examined it with renewed focus. Running a gloved finger along its edge, he felt the same faint draught he had detected before. "Here," he said, his voice low with anticipation. "The passage lies behind. Let us reveal it once more." With Hastings' assistance, they pushed the bookcase aside, its groan echoing in the quiet studio. The narrow panel in the wall was exposed, its edges rough, but cleverly concealed by the room's panelling. Beyond it, a dark passage stretched into shadow, its air cool and musty, carrying the faint scent of damp stone. Poirot produced his small torch, its beam cutting through the gloom to reveal a cramped, winding corridor that descended slightly before turning out of sight. "Extraordinary," Hastings murmured, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "A secret passage in a Chelsea studio. It's like something out of a Gothic novel." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, Hastings, it is practical, not romantic. This passage, it was known to someone who used it to enter and leave unseen. Observe the floor." He directed the torch downward, illuminating a faint trail of disturbed dust, marred by a single smudge of vermilion paint identical to that found near the vial under the easel. Hastings crouched, squinting at the mark. "That's the same paint as on the canvas, isn't it? The rose, the vermilion. Someone tracked it in here." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice sharp with satisfaction. "The murderer, he was careless, or perhaps hurried. This paint, it links the passage to the crime. But who knew of this hidden way? Lemaire, certainly. But who else?" They followed the passage, its walls closing in as it twisted toward a small wooden door, barely visible in the torchlight. Poirot pushed it open, revealing a narrow alley behind the building, its cobbles slick with recent rain. The door was concealed by a stack of crates, easily moved but effective in hiding the exit. Poirot stepped into the alley, his eyes scanning the ground. A faint scuff mark, barely noticeable, marred the edge of a cobble, and a single petal, crimson like the rose in the painting, lay caught in a crack. "Voilà," Poirot said, picking up the petal with a delicate touch. "A rose, like the one in Lemaire's canvas. Not a coincidence, I think. Someone passed through here, carrying the scent of the studio." Hastings frowned, his practical mind grappling with the implications. So, the killer came through the passage, poisoned Lemaire, and slipped out this way, locking the door behind them? But how did they lock it from the outside? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A question for the little grey cells, mon ami. The bolt. It is inside, yes, but there are ways. Strings, perhaps, or a mechanism we have not yet found. We must examine the door more closely. Back in the studio, Poirot turned his attention to the bolted door. The lock was sturdy, the bolt slid firmly into place, but he noticed a faint scratch on the frame, as if something had been wedged against it. Kneeling, he inspected the floor beneath, finding a tiny sliver of wood, no longer than a matchstick, lodged in a crack. "Curious," he murmured, holding it to the light. "This wood, it is not from the door. Perhaps a tool used to manipulate the bolt from outside." Hastings shook his head, impressed, but baffled. "You're saying someone rigged the door to look locked? That's devilishly clever, Poirot." "Clever, oui," Poirot agreed, rising, "but not perfect. The murderer, he planned well, but haste or fear betrayed him. The paint, the petal, the wood, they are his mistakes." He returned to the easel, his eyes drawn once more to the canvas. The woman's shadowed face seemed to mock him. Her rose a vivid accusation. "This painting," he said, "it is the heart of the mystery. Lemaire painted it with purpose, knowing it might cost him his life. The passage, the poison, they are means, but the canvas is the motive." Hastings, standing by the bookcase, ventured a thought. "Do you think one of the suspects knew about the passage? Sir Reginald, maybe. He's got the money to know the building's secrets. Or Clara, she's sharp enough to notice something like this." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Or Mademoiselle Moreau, who was so close to Lemaire. Each had opportunity, each had reason. But the passage, it narrows our field. Only someone intimate with the studio would know its secret. He moved to the table, where the bottle of turpentine still stood, its cap loose, its contents faintly discolored. "This," he said, "is another thread." Mademoiselle Beaumont noted its foul smell, and Mademoiselle Moreau confirmed it. "The poison, I suspect, is linked to this bottle. We must have it tested, Hastings. The cyanide, it was not drunk, but perhaps inhaled or absorbed through the skin." As they prepared to leave, Poirot took one last look at the passage, its dark mouth a silent witness to the crime. "The studio, it speaks," he said softly. "The passage, the paint, the canvas, they tell a story of betrayal and fear, and we, mon ami, will listen until the tale is complete." Outside, the Chelsea streets were cloaked in dusk, the air sharp with the threat of rain. Poirot adjusted his hat, his thoughts turning to the suspects, Sir Reginald's guarded wealth, Clara's biting scorn, Elise's fragile grief. The passage had unlocked one mystery, but others remained, hidden in the shadows of Lemaire's final work. Chapter 8. The Scandalous Painting. The late afternoon light filtered through the high windows of a discreet art gallery in Soho, its walls lined with canvases that whispered of wealth and taste. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, stood before a minor work by Victor Lemaire, a delicate study of a moonlit garden, far removed from the chaotic urgency of the half-finished canvas in the Chelsea studio. Captain Hastings, at his side, shifted uncomfortably, his practical nature ill at ease in the hushed reverence of the gallery. "I say, Poirot," Hastings murmured, glancing at the other patrons, a mix of well-dressed collectors and sharp-eyed critics. "Why are we here? This place is all polish and pomp. Hardly seems the spot to dig up dirt on Lemaire's murder." Poirot's green eyes twinkled, his moustache curving with a knowing smile. "Mon ami, The world of art is a world of secrets. This gallery, it was Lemaire's stage, where his works were bought and sold, praised and scorned. Here we may find whispers of a painting that never saw the light, a painting that cost him his life. They had come to meet Mr. Theodore Grayson, the gallery's owner, and Lemaire's long-time dealer, a man rumoured to know every secret of London's art scene. Grayson, a wiry figure with a pinched face and spectacles perched on a sharp nose, greeted them in a private office at the gallery's rear, its walls adorned with sketches and receipts rather than masterpieces. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Grayson said, his voice smooth but tinged with caution. "A dreadful business, Lemaire's death. He was a genius, if a temperamental one. How can I assist you?" Poirot settled into a chair, his hands clasped, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Grayson, you knew Victor Lemaire well, oui? His works, his patrons, his indiscretions. I am interested in a particular painting, one that was not shown, perhaps one that was hidden. A canvas that spoke of scandal." Grayson's spectacles glinted as he leaned back, his fingers drumming on the desk. A scandalous painting? Lemaire was prolific, but discreet about certain works. He did private commissions, pieces for collectors who preferred privacy. You're referring to the canvas in his studio, I presume? The woman with the rose? "Non," Poirot said, his voice firm. "That canvas, it is unfinished, a mystery of its own. I speak of another, one rumoured to depict a scene that could ruin reputations. A painting, perhaps, that Sir Reginald Holt wished to keep hidden." Grayson's drumming fingers stilled, and his eyes narrowed. "You've been talking to the right people, Monsieur Poirot. There was talk, whispers really, of a painting Lemaire worked on last year. He called it The Masquerade, said it captured a truth no one dared speak. I never saw it, mind you. He kept it locked away, said it was for a private buyer. But word got out, servants' talk, you know, that it showed a masked ball with figures too recognizable for comfort." Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "Recognizable? You mean real people? Was Sir Reginald in it?" Grayson hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting eavesdroppers. "I can't say for certain. Lemaire was cagey, but he hinted the painting involved a prominent figure, a man of wealth and a woman of questionable virtue. He said it would shake London if it were shown. I advised him to destroy it, but he laughed, said it was his insurance." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind seizing on the word. "Insurance, monsieur? Against what? Blackmail, perhaps? Or a threat to his patron?" Grayson shrugged, but his unease was palpable. Lemaire had debts. Sir Reginald covered many, but not all. I think he saw the painting as leverage, a way to keep his patron generous. But he never showed it to me, and I don't know where it is. If it exists, it's likely in his studio, hidden somewhere." Poirot nodded, his thoughts racing. "And this masquerade, it was not the canvas we found, the woman with the rose?" "No," Grayson said firmly. "That one's new, started only weeks ago. The masquerade was older, finished, or nearly so. Lemaire kept it under lock and key, said it was too dangerous to display." Rising, Poirot paced the small office, his steps measured, his mind a whirl of connections. "Dangerous, oui, dangerous enough to kill for. Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, did Lemaire ever mention Mademoiselle Beaumont or Mademoiselle Moreau in connection with this painting?" Grayson adjusted his spectacles, considering. "Clara Beaumont. She reviewed Lemaire's work harshly, called The Masquerade a rumour, said it was probably a myth to boost his ego. As for Elise Moreau, she was his model for many works, but I don't know if she posed for that one. Lemaire was secretive, even with her. Poirot paused by a sketch on the wall, a preliminary drawing of a masked figure, its lines bold but unfinished, and yet secrets have a way of escaping. Merci, Monsieur Grayson. You have painted a vivid picture. As they left the gallery, Hastings shook his head. A painting that could ruin someone. That's motive, Poirot. Sir Reginald. He admitted to a private commission, that masked ball in his study. Could that be the masquerade? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice low. But I think not. The painting in Holt's study, it is bold, but not dangerous. The masquerade, it is something more. A threat, a weapon. We must return to the studio, Hastings. If this painting exists, it is there, hidden among Lemaire's works. They hailed a cab, the Soho streets fading into the gathering dusk. Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities. The scandalous painting, the secret passage, the poisoned turpentine. Each suspect, he knew, was tied to Lemaire's final act. But the painting was the key. As the cab rattled toward Chelsea, he murmured, Lemaire painted a truth too dangerous to reveal, and someone ensured it would remain in shadow. Chapter 9. The Poison's Path. The Chelsea studio of Victor Lemaire stood silent under a sky bruised with clouds, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across its cluttered interior. Hercule Poirot, his small frame a study in precision, moved through the room with the quiet intensity of a man unraveling a tapestry thread by thread. Captain Hastings followed, his brow furrowed, his practical mind struggling to keep pace with Poirot's relentless logic. The air still carried the sharp bite of turpentine, now mingled with the faint metallic tang of the coroner's recent work, a reminder of the death that lingered here. Poirot paused by the easel, where the half-finished canvas of the woman with the rose stood like a sentinel, its colours vivid, yet incomplete. The painting, he murmured. It speaks, but we have yet to hear its full story. Today, Hastings, we seek the path of the poison, the silent killer that took Lemaire's life. Hastings, glancing at the vial still lying beneath the easel, nodded. Japp's men confirmed it's cyanide, but no cup, no glass, nothing to show how he took it. It's a puzzle, Poirot. How does a man swallow poison without a trace? Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with the faintest hint of a smile. Swallow, mon ami. Perhaps he did not. The coroner's report, it tells us Lemaire's stomach held only bread and cheese, no trace of liquid. The cyanide, it wasn't drunk. No, we must look elsewhere for its path. He moved to the table, cluttered with art supplies, his gloved hands hovering over the scattered brushes and jars. The bottle of turpentine, its cap loose and its contents faintly discoloured, drew his attention once more. He lifted it carefully, holding it to the light, noting the subtle cloudiness within. This, he said, is where the poison hides, I think. Mademoiselle Beaumont spoke of a foul smell. Mademoiselle Moreau confirmed it. And now, we must prove it. Hastings frowned, leaning closer. You think he drank turpentine? That's mad, Poirot. No one would— Non, Poirot interrupted, his voice sharp but patient. Not drank, Hastings. Inhaled, perhaps, or absorbed. Cyanide. It is versatile. Its fumes can kill as surely as its liquid form. Lemaire, he worked late, breathing the air of this studio, his hands wet with paint and turpentine. Suppose the poison was mixed here, in this bottle, its vapours rising as he worked. Hastings' eyes widened. Good Lord, that's devilish! You mean someone tampered with the turpentine, knowing he'd breathe it in? Précisément, Poirot said, setting the bottle down with care. It is subtle, silent, a murderer's art. We must have this tested, but I am certain the turpentine is our poison's path. He turned to the constable at the door, who had been watching with a mix of awe and skepticism. Monsieur, please ensure this bottle is sent to the laboratory at once. Test for cyanide, but also for any residue that might betray a foreign hand. The cap. It is loose. Perhaps fingerprints remain. The constable nodded, scribbling a note. I'll tell Inspector Japp, sir. Anything else? Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on the overturned chair, the vermilion smudge, the secret passage now sealed with police tape. Oui, he said. Examine the rags on this table. If the poison was mixed, there may be traces, paint, perhaps, or the cyanide itself. As the constable stepped out to relay orders, Hastings scratched his head. It's clever, Poirot. I'll give you that. But who could have done it? Sir Reginald was here early, Clara after him, Elise last. Any of them could have tampered with the bottle. But how'd they know to use cyanide? Poirot paced, his steps measured, his mind a whirl of connections. Knowledge, Hastings, is not so rare. Cyanide, it is used in photography, in cleaning, common enough for one with intent. Sir Reginald, he has the means, the wealth to procure such things. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she studied chemistry in her youth, a fact I learned from Grayson's records. And Mademoiselle Moreau, so close to Lemaire, might have seen more than she admits. He paused by the canvas, his eyes tracing the woman's shadowed form. But the motive, it lies here. The painting, the scandal it hints at. The masquerade, perhaps, or this rose, this woman. Lemaire painted a truth someone feared. The poison, it was not random. It was precise, planned. Hastings, following Poirot's gaze, ventured a thought. You think the painting and the poison are linked, that someone killed him to stop him finishing it? Or to stop him revealing it, Poirot said, his voice low. The turpentine, the passage, the canvas, they form a pattern. The murderer knew Lemaire's habits, knew he would work late, breathing the poisoned air. And the passage, only one who knew the studio's secrets could use it to escape. He knelt by the easel, examining the vial once more. Its position, half hidden, suggested haste or carelessness, but Poirot suspected intent. This vial, he said, it was left to be found, perhaps to mislead. But the turpentine, it is the true weapon. We must learn who had access, who lingered in this room. Hastings, ever eager to help, pointed to the scattered rags. What about these? If the killer mixed the poison, they might have used a rag, left some trace. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. Bonne idée, Hastings. The rags, they are intimate with the artist's work, stained with paint, with turpentine, perhaps with guilt. We shall see what they reveal. As they prepared to leave, Poirot took one last look at the canvas, its rose glowing like a beacon in the dim light. Lemaire, he murmured, you painted your own death warrant. But Hercule Poirot, he will read it, and the truth will be known. Outside, the Chelsea streets were cloaked in twilight, the air sharp with the scent of impending rain. Poirot adjusted his gloves, his thoughts turning to the suspects. Sir Reginald's wealth, Clara's knowledge, Elise's intimacy. The poison's path was clear, but the hand that set it remained in shadow. The little grey cells, however, were relentless, and they would not rest until the canvas's secret was unveiled. Chapter 10. The model's deception. The twilight cast a soft violet hue over Bloomsbury as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings approached Elise Moreau's modest flat once more. The narrow street was hushed, the day's bustle giving way to the quiet of evening, and the tenement's faded facade seemed to absorb the fading light as if guarding its secrets. Poirot, his small frame wrapped in a neatly pressed overcoat, paused at the entrance, his green eyes scanning the windows above with the intensity of a painter studying a blank canvas. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his scarf against the evening chill. "Back to Elise, Poirot. She seemed so fragile last time. Do you really think she's hiding something? She's just a model, not a mastermind." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement at Hastings's straightforwardness. "Mon ami, the heart of a woman is a labyrinth, and beauty can conceal as much as it reveals. Mademoiselle Moreau, she is more than a muse. She was Lemaire's confidant, his inspiration, and in her tears I sense a truth she has not yet spoken." They climbed the creaking stairs, the air heavy with the scent of boiled cabbage and old wood. Elise opened the door before they could knock, her delicate features pale in the dim light of a single candle. Her golden hair was pinned loosely, and her violet eyes, though still shadowed with grief, held a flicker of wariness. She stepped aside, gesturing them into the small sitting room, where the sketch of the mysterious woman still hung on the wall, its eyes seeming to follow them. "Merci, mademoiselle, for seeing us again," Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm as he took the chair she offered. "The death of Victor Lemaire, it weighs heavily on you, no? I wish to speak again of that final night, and of the canvas, the woman with the rose. There is something you have not told us, I think." Elise sat on the sofa, her hands clasping the edge of her shawl, her fingers trembling slightly. "I've told you everything, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I posed for Victor until midnight. He was nervous, working on that painting. I left him alive. What more can I say?" Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing yet kind, like a physician probing a wound. "Mademoiselle, you are sincere, but not complete. The sketch on your wall, it is a study for the canvas, oui? Yet you said the woman wasn't you, not quite. I ask again, who was she? And what did Lemaire mean when he called her a shadow of truth?" Elise's eyes darted to the sketch, then back to Poirot, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victor was secretive. He said the painting would reveal something, but he wouldn't tell me what. I thought it might be a woman he knew, someone from his past. But he never said her name." Hastings, standing by the window, interjected with his usual directness. "Come now, Miss Moreau. You were his muse. He must have let something slip. That painting, it's got everyone in a tizzy. Was it meant to ruin someone? Like Sir Reginald?" Elise's hands tightened on her shawl, and she shook her head, her golden curls catching the candlelight. "Victor didn't say it was Sir Reginald, but he was angry with him. He said Sir Reginald wanted too much control, always demanding paintings to suit his ego. The canvas, the one in the studio, it wasn't for him. It was personal." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind seizing on her words. "Personal, mademoiselle. A painting so personal it cost Lemaire his life. Tell me, did he ever speak of another work? The Masquerade? A painting of a masked ball, perhaps, with figures that could not be shown." Elise's breath caught, and for a moment her composure faltered. "The masquerade," she repeated, her voice trembling. He mentioned it once, months ago, said it was his boldest work, but too dangerous to show. He kept it hidden, locked in a chest in the studio. I never saw it, but he said it would bring down the mighty. I begged him to destroy it, but he laughed, said it was his power. Poirot's moustache quivered, a sign of his mind racing. Power, mademoiselle. Power over whom? Sir Reginald Holt, perhaps. A man whose wealth and reputation could be shattered by a single canvas. Elisa's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, her voice breaking. I don't know. Victor was obsessed, driven. He said the painting, the one with the rose, was connected to the masquerade. He was going to show them together, to prove something. I told him it was dangerous, that he was playing with fire. But he wouldn't listen. Poirot rose, pacing the small room with measured steps, his eyes drawn to the sketch on the wall. Its lines were delicate, yet there was a strength in the woman's gaze, a defiance that echoed the rose in the studio canvas. "This sketch," he said, "it is a bridge between the two paintings. The woman, she is not you, but she is close. Her eyes, her spirit. Did Le Maire ever paint another woman in your presence, mademoiselle? Or did he use you to create her?" Elise's tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands. "He used me," she whispered. "He said I was the form, but not the soul. The woman in the painting? She was someone else, someone he loved once, or hated. He wouldn't say. But he was afraid, Monsieur Poirot, afraid of what he'd done." Poirot's voice softened, but his questions were relentless. "Afraid, mademoiselle?" And yet he painted on, knowing the danger. "Did you see anyone else that night? Did you know of the secret passage behind the bookcase?" Elise's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "A passage? No, I swear, I didn't know. Victor never mentioned it. I left through the front door, as always. You must believe me." Poirot studied her, his expression unreadable. "I believe you speak the truth, mademoiselle, but not all of it. You loved Le Maire in your way. Did you protect him, or did you protect another by keeping silent?" Her sobs broke the silence, and she shook her head, unable to answer. Poirot stepped back, his gaze softening. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have given me much to consider. The canvas, the passage, the fear. They weave a story, and I will unravel it." As they left the flat, Hastings turned to Poirot, his face troubled. "She's in deep, isn't she? All that talk of love and fear. She knows who the woman in the painting is. I'd bet my hat on it." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant as they descended the stairs. "Oui, Hastings. Mademoiselle Moreau. She is a mirror, reflecting Le Maire's truth, but distorting it. The woman in the canvas. She is the key. A noble woman, perhaps, tied to Sir Reginald's scandal. We must find the masquerade, mon ami. It holds the motive for murder." The Bloomsbury streets were dark now, the air sharp with the scent of coal smoke and damp leaves. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind alight with the threads of the mystery. The poisoned turpentine, the hidden passage, the scandalous painting. Elise's tears had revealed a truth, but the full picture remained in shadow, waiting for the little grey cells to bring it to light. Chapter 11. The Critic's Alibi. The morning mist clung to the streets of Chelsea as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the modest home of Mrs. Grayson, the neighbour Clara Beaumont had cited as her alibi. The air was damp, carrying the faint tang of the Thames, and the cobblestones glistened underfoot. Poirot, his overcoat immaculate despite the weather, walked with the purposeful stride of a man closing in on a truth, his green eyes bright with the fire of his little grey cells. Hastings, ever the faithful companion, kept pace, his expression a mix of curiosity and scepticism. "I say, Poirot," Hastings ventured, pulling his scarf tighter. "Clara's story seemed solid enough. Home by 11, neighbour saw her. Do you really think she's lying? She's sharp, but poison? That's a bit much, even for her." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his quiet amusement. "Mon ami, a sharp tongue can conceal a sharper mind. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she is no mere critic. She is a woman of intellect and passion, capable of much when provoked. Her alibi, it is convenient, but convenience is not truth. We shall see what Madame Grayson reveals." Mrs. Grayson's home, a narrow terraced house adjacent to Lemaire's studio, was tidy but unremarkable, its curtains drawn against the morning's gloom. The door opened to reveal a stout woman in her 60s, her grey hair pinned neatly, her eyes wary but polite. She ushered them into a cramped parlour, where a fire crackled weakly and a kettle hummed on a side table. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice tinged with the weariness of one accustomed to interruption. "I suppose this is about poor Mr. Lemaire. Dreadful business. I told the inspector what I saw, but I'm happy to help." Poirot inclined his head, his manner courteous but probing. "Merci, Madame Grayson. You are a neighbour most observant, I think. Mademoiselle Clara Beaumont claims you saw her return home the night of Lemaire's death, around 11 o'clock. Tell me, if you please, exactly what you saw." Mrs. Grayson poured tea, her hands steady but her lips pursed. "It was just past 11, as I told Inspector Japp. I was up late, tending to my husband. He's poorly, you see. I looked out my window, and there was Miss Beaumont hurrying down the street. She went into her house, just across from mine. I saw her light go on upstairs a moment later. That's all." Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes never leaving her face. "And you are certain of the time, madame?" 11 o'clock. Not later. The street. It was dark, non. Yet you recognized Mademoiselle Beaumont without doubt." Mrs. Grayson nodded, though her fingers tightened on her teacup. "Oh, yes, the street lamp's right outside, and I know her walk. Brisk, like she's always got somewhere to be. It was her, no mistake. She's often out late, writing her reviews or meeting with artists." Hastings leaned forward, his tone earnest. "Did you hear anything unusual that night? From Lemaire's studio, maybe? A shout, a crash, anything at all?" Mrs. Grayson frowned, her eyes distant. "Nothing I'd call unusual. The studio's always quiet, except for Mr. Lemaire's music sometimes. He played that gramophone of his when he worked late. I heard it faintly, some opera, until nearly midnight. After that, nothing. Just the rain." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind seizing on the detail. "Midnight, you say? And then silence? Most interesting. Madame, did you see anyone else that night? Sir Reginald Holt, perhaps, or Mademoiselle Elise Moreau?" Mrs. Grayson shook her head. "I saw Sir Reginald's car earlier, around 9. He left before 10, I'd say. Miss Moreau, she came and went around midnight, as she often did. No one else, not that I noticed." Poirot set down his cup, his movements precise. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. One final question. Mademoiselle Beaumont's ring, the silver one she wears, have you ever noticed it? Does it hold significance, perhaps?" Mrs. Grayson blinked, surprised by the question. "Her ring? I've seen it, yes. She's always twisting it, like a nervous habit. I don't know its story, but she's worn it as long as I've known her." As they left the house, Poirot paused on the doorstep, his gaze drifting to the street lamp and the window of Clara's house across the way. "The alibi. It holds, for now," he murmured. But the little grey cells, they are not satisfied. The ring, the gramophone, the silence, they tell a story. Hastings, following him into the street, frowned. "You don't believe her, do you? Clara, I mean. That ring, it's got you curious, hasn't it?" "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low. "The ring, it is a clue, but not yet clear. And the gramophone. Why did it stop at midnight? Le Maire was alive, painting, yet the music ceased. Was it to hear a visitor, perhaps, or to mask a sound?" They returned to the studio, where the air was heavy with the scent of paint and turpentine. Poirot moved to the table, his eyes falling on a rag, its edge stained with vermilion paint. He lifted it, noting a faint shimmer of something metallic caught in its fibers. "Curious," he said, holding it to the light. "This rag, it has seen more than paint. Perhaps a trace of Mademoiselle Beaumont's ring." Hastings's eyes widened. "You think Clara was here later than she said?" "But Mrs. Grayson saw her home by 11. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Saw her, oui. But saw what? A figure, a light. The street lamp, it is bright but not precise. And the passage, Hastings, it offers another way in and out. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she knows more than she admits." He turned to the canvas, its rose glowing in the dim light. "The painting, the poison, the passage, they are linked by a single hand. Clara Beaumont, her venom is not only in her words. We must watch her closely, mon ami." As they left the studio, the Chelsea streets were cloaked in mist, the street lamp casting a ghostly glow. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind weaving the threads of the mystery. The critic's alibi, the stained rag, the silent gramophone. The truth was near, and the little grey cells would not rest until it was unveiled. Chapter 12. The Final Brushstroke. The Chelsea studio of Victor Le Maire was bathed in the pale glow of a single lamp as Hercule Poirot gathered the suspects in its cramped, paint-scented confines. The evening air was heavy with anticipation, the rain having ceased to leave a stillness that seemed to amplify every creak of the old building. Sir Reginald Holt stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense, his blue eyes wary. Clara Beaumont sat rigidly in a chair, her auburn hair pinned tightly, a silver ring glinting as she twisted it. Elise Moreau perched on the edge of a stool, her violet eyes red-rimmed, her hands clutching a handkerchief. Inspector Japp, flanked by 2 constables, stood near the door, his face set in grim determination. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, hovered at Poirot's side, his expression a mix of awe and impatience. Poirot stood before the easel, the half-finished canvas of the woman with the rose at his back, its shadowed form a silent witness to the drama unfolding. He clasped his hands, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured, "we are here to unveil the truth behind the death of Victor Le Maire, a man whose art was his life, and his doom. The little grey cells, they have worked tirelessly, and now they will paint the final picture." Sir Reginald shifted, his voice clipped. "Get on with it, Monsieur Poirot. I've answered your questions. I was at my club after 10. I had no reason to harm Le Maire." Clara's eyes flashed, her tone sharp. "Nor I. My review was harsh, but I didn't kill him. I was home by 11, as my neighbor confirmed. Elise's voice trembled, barely audible. I loved Victor. I left him alive at midnight. Please, you must believe me. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them with a gesture. Patience, s'il vous plaît. Each of you has told a story, and each holds a piece of the truth. But the truth, it is like Lemaire's canvas, complete only when all strokes are seen. Let us begin with the scene. A locked studio, a dead artist, a vial of cyanide, and this painting. He gestured to the canvas, its rose vivid against the shadowed figure. But the room, it was not truly locked. A secret passage, hidden behind the bookcase, allowed entry and exit unseen. Japp nodded, his voice gruff. We found the passage, Poirot. Leads to the alley. Explains how the killer got out. But not who. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, Inspector. The passage, it is the how, but the why lies in the canvas, and in another painting, the masquerade. Lemaire painted a scene of a masked ball, a scandal involving a noblewoman and a man of wealth. This painting, it was his weapon, his insurance, as he told Mademoiselle Moreau. It threatened to ruin someone. He turned to Sir Reginald, his gaze piercing. You, Sir Reginald, commissioned such works. The painting in your study, it hints at scandal, but it is not the masquerade. That canvas, hidden in Lemaire's studio, depicted you and a noblewoman in a compromising moment. Lemaire refused to destroy it. He demanded payment, or he would reveal it. Holt's face darkened, but he remained silent, his hands clenching. Poirot continued, undeterred. You visited Lemaire at 9, discussing a new commission. But you knew of the masquerade. You feared its exposure would ruin your reputation, your marriage, so you planned a silent murder. Clara interjected, her voice sharp. That's absurd. If anyone had reason to hate Lemaire, it was me. He threatened to expose my past, a foolish affair from my student days. But I didn't kill him. I argued with him, and left. Poirot nodded, his smile enigmatic. Oui, Mademoiselle Beaumont, your alibi is strong, your neighbor's testimony clear. But your ring, it bears a trace of vermilion paint, the same as Lemaire's rose. You were in the studio, perhaps later than you claim, but you did not kill him. Your venom was in words, not poison. He turned to Elise, whose tears had begun to fall. And you, mademoiselle, you were Lemaire's muse, his light. You posed for the canvas, but the woman was not you. A noble woman, tied to Sir Reginald. You knew of the masquerade, begged Lemaire to destroy it. But you did not kill him. Your heart, it was too gentle for murder. Poirot paced, his voice rising with conviction. The poison, it was not drunk, but inhaled. The turpentine bottle, tampered with, carried cyanide. Lemaire, working late, breathed its fumes, his death silent and swift. The vial under the easel, it was a distraction, left to mislead. But the passage, the paint, the petal in the alley, they point to one hand. He stopped before Sir Reginald, his eyes like steel. You, Sir Reginald, knew the studio's secrets. You funded its renovations, learned of the passage from old plans. You entered that night after your visit through the passage. You mixed cyanide into the turpentine, knowing Lemaire's habit of working late. You watched him paint, perhaps, then slipped away, locking the door with a simple string through the bolt, a trick to make it seem he died alone. Holt's face was ashen, his voice hoarse. You've no proof, Poirot. This is speculation. Poirot's smile was serene. Non, monsieur. The laboratory, it confirms cyanide in the turpentine. The petal in the alley, it matches the roses in your home. And the passage floor, vermilion paint, from your shoes tracked as you fled. You killed Lemaire to silence his canvas, to bury the masquerade. Holt staggered, his composure crumbling. He was going to ruin me, he whispered. That painting, it would have destroyed everything. I had no choice. Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs glinting. That's enough, Sir Reginald. You're coming with us. As the constables led Holt away, Elise sobbed softly, and Clara's scowl softened into something like relief. Poirot turned to the canvas, its rose glowing in the lamplight. Lemaire's final stroke, he said softly. It was his truth. And Hercule Poirot, he has honored it. Hastings, watching the scene, shook his head in awe. You did it again, Poirot. The little grey cells, they never fail. Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes distant. Non, mon ami. They see what others miss. And now, the canvas is complete.